Hello. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So, lads, if you'd like to sit down there. No bother, no bother. Thanks very much. So, hello everyone. My name is John Egan and I'm CEO and founder at BIMLauncher. So I'm here to talk to you all today about the distributed common data environment and how it is relevant to the future of the common data environment. So I'd like to open on this topic where Bruce Schneier, I suppose, introduced in 2000s this concept of people, process, and technology, and how it can really enable operational efficiency in an organization. And what I'd like to suggest is that our technology is broken and we need to fix it. So the process, I would argue, is quite mature. You know, it's the whole development of information and building is so mature that we've actually standardized it. So the fact that the technology isn't actually working for us means that our project delivery, I believe, is actually falling over. And this three-legged stool, I suppose, illustrates the three pillars of the PPT framework, people, process, technology. And I think, and I suppose I'd just like to ask, just to get a general consensus of everyone in the audience, like, what is a common data environment? Is a CDE a process, a technology, or both? So I'd like to get a quick show of hands for, is it a process? Okay. Is it a technology? Okay. Or is it both together? Okay. All right, so there's quite a varied response to that. Next question. Are these things different? CDE, the project CDE, a CDE solution, or distributed CDE? And these are all terms taken from our ISO 19650. So are these different or the same? Hands up for different. Is there any difference between those terms, or are they the same? Some differences. Okay. So the point that I'd like to make out of the back of that is that the ISO does not actually talk about tech, and I believe what's actually happened here is that the technology vendors have adopted what the process has implied and offered up an implementation of that process to the industry, and it doesn't fit what the industry actually requires. So what the vendors and the technology solutions are actually advocating is that you use one system, one platform, one CDE to facilitate your communications and collaboration of information in a project. But whilst that's great in theory, it's not great in practice. And the reason is that, because there's all sorts of issues with actually using the common data environment in practice for all the stakeholders that are involved. So some of these issues are like legal issues. So, for example, people or certain organizations need to maintain access to documentation records after the project completes, i.e. the backup and archive of information. They need to keep access to that information. The mobilization issues when they're actually looking to use more than or one CDE on a project. So your delivery team might often be using SharePoint, and your contractor might be using BIM 360. So you have to actually set up and enable the connections and the data exchange between those platforms. You have security issues such as enabling permissions on the different EDMSs and actually working with the uncontrolled documents that flow between these systems. Political issues like server locations. So due to, let's say, for instance, I suppose government requirements to not hold their data outside of the country, meaning that you have to bend and flex to, I suppose, these needs. And in order to do that, technology solutions, the existing technology solutions, may not necessarily do that. And then you have financial issues like licensing or buying licenses to individual CDs and actually bearing the cost of that after the project actually completes. And the other issues is also training your staff on more than one system. So more than often, a design team might have the client or contractor bring their own CD and force them to use that, and a design team might actually end up using 5-10 other CDs, and all the staff that is actually working on the projects needs to work with that. So one of our customers is actually, this is a quote from one of them. They said, "Software needs to accommodate the industry and not the other way around." So this brings me on to Conway's Law. Conway's Law says that any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. And why I think this is pertinent is because that if we were to design a system that would facilitate the industry's needs, if we actually were to design, or if the construction industry designed a system from the industry's needs, I suppose that system would reflect the communication structures between all the individual stakeholders that are working on that project. And what I've done here is taken a snapshot out of the report from Box, Tale of Five Industries is the report name. And what they've done is visualized the communication structures between all the different nodes or all the different stakeholders on a project. So each node here represents an individual user on the project. And in reality, what we actually work on, or what we actually do on our projects is, I suppose, each different organization would use their own system, their own preferred EDMS system. And what this does is creates these boundaries between systems, but the exchange still needs to pass between these EDMS systems. And more than often or not, this is hugely inefficient. It adds risk to the project. Metadata is lost and so forth. So what we're doing is we're proposing a new distributed common data environment protocol that solves these problems and actually enables these EDMS systems to work together on a project. So what we're defining it as is a distributed technology protocol that provides the missing layer to support the requirements of the CDE per ISO 19650 amongst the project EDMS systems. So I know I suppose I've prepared this presentation, but I just want to get a show of hands. Everyone with me, or like I'm much more natural asking if you ask questions and kind of interrogate me. So I don't know whether people are following along or whether, will I keep going? Keep going, I get off the stage. So we have some principles, some guidelines on how we propose that this protocol should take form. And one of the first things is that we actually think that people, back to the PPT framework, that people actually have a lot to do with this, they have to, so our BIM coordinators actually need to catch up with the terminology in the ISO. And they need to basically understand some basic concepts. And one of these is that, there is a work in progress state, which is private. So that's where your teams do all their internal collaboration. And then you have a shared state and a published state. And everything that's in this shared and published state should be considered as public. And the reason is that the workflows will actually, and the transfer of information actually is shared between the shared and published states between your EDMS system and any other EDMS system that's used on the project. The next thing is that status determines state and workflows observe status. So there's a direct correlation between the shared state and the statuses. And this is something that it often goes over people's heads, and we feel that, we need to make the point of. But these statuses are important because they trigger workflows, and these workflows are the things that connect the dots, connect the EDMS systems used on the project. The next thing is that we propose that there's a metadata first, a pure metadata approach to, managing information containers. So this was actually written out of, so in the BS 1192, in the first version, they actually said that you could actually use file naming convention as a means to transfer metadata about an information container, or you could use a pure metadata approach. And what we feel that, in the 19650, the reason that pure metadata approach has been written out of it, or even the suggestion being written out of it, is because of accessibility of our existing technology platforms. And when I've broached this topic of file naming conventions to the general industry, what's happened is the first point we need to be able to find information, but the way that we do that is through our existing systems. They're Windows to I'm not a Windows user, 98, Windows 2010 or whatever you call Windows, the latest Windows. So they need to be able to, adopt some sort of query language that is common amongst their EDMS system and their local computer. But what's actually happening is that technology is actually, I would argue, is now able to work with a pure metadata approach. And we feel that there's a lot more potential than just using metadata to find information, but also using metadata to store state to do with the provenance of that information container, where that information container has gone in the past, what workflows it's passed through, who approved it, etc. Maybe we even use it to store state to do with some machine learning state. But either way, we feel that the information container should have all of the metadata attached to that, and that should travel and be built on by the solutions through the life cycle of that information container. The next thing, and this is something that's, something that we in BIMLauncher have built a technology solution around, but many of the EDMS systems don't actually create new versions of that information container when there's a change in the information container, such as metadata. So in BIM 360, as you might know, you can change metadata, but there's no actual version bump, or that change isn't actually version controlled, which makes it very difficult to replicate that information container around the different other EDMS systems. So I suppose the reason that I've shared all this with you is because I believe that the DCD is, a missing layer. It's that layer between the process and technology that I feel is missing. I think it's the layer that will actually unify the technology, to go back to the PPT framework, actually enable the technology to deliver on our, meet the needs of our process and the people that are actually building our projects. And I think that until we get this framework actually sorted, I don't believe that conversations around BIM or digital twins and all the other concepts that we're all clapping our hands around in the industry is actually worth a conversation. I think that we need to make technology work for us, and until we do that and actually join up and integrate these and do that through the joined up and integration of all the technology solutions, we're not actually going to be able to progress as an industry. So thanks for listening. I don't actually think there's questions now. I think that there's questions afterwards, but I don't know whether I have time either. No, out of time as well. So yeah, thanks very much.